Live from the Washington, D.C. area, it's the Inside Scoop. All the news that our viewers want to know. Now, here's the host.
Hi, we're here. Hey folks, Cesar here. Thanks for joining us. We have a great show this evening. In fact, you're going to stick around for the whole thing. My first guest is the current chair of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee. Near and dear to my heart, please welcome Dan Lagana. Thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
I've been in that chair, literally,
yeah.
figuratively as well. So let's talk about stuff here, man. It's an exciting time.
It is.
Politically, regionally. I mean, where can we start here, man? Let's start off here.
You know, what's interesting is maybe we can depart Fairfax County for a bit and just look at our neighbor to the east, Alexandria, and I was watching their primary closely. I know we had a 10th district primary here, and that was our
That's the big pot.
That was the big pot, but I also have to look down the road, and I was just keen to see how the city would vote this year in their city council elections, just to inform my view of what the county may look like in 2019, and. I was, for those who may not be familiar, the city of Alexandria elected the most diverse and youngest city council in its history. And they have, it was really, the mayor's race was really a competing vision. I mean, you really had two distinct visions for the city, and you could choose each one. Mm-hmm. You saw incumbents on the city council lose and really fall, I think, pretty far down in terms of their vote counts, and you saw a growth in the turnout universe or in the electorate, and it was striking to me the results of some of this. The highest vote getter was a first-time candidate, Elizabeth Bennett Parker. She got over 1,300 votes, and she, 32 years old, started a nonprofit and moved to the city, I think maybe 5 years ago. You had an incumbent, 6 or 7 term incumbent, lose, and lose pretty, received, I believe, 7th or 8th in the vote totals, Paul Smedberg, who is an outstanding public servant. And it was really a message that it seemed to be that this city that has been growing in its diversity and is reflective of a lot of the economic trends we see in Fairfax County in some respect, elected this new slate of people.
Well, change is in the air, but this is something else, right? This is more, it's diversity, it's economic, it's the interests that aren't necessarily being represented by the current elected officials.
Yeah, what's really interesting about that? This was the first time in the city of Alexandria's history where there is not one person, I believe, I may be wrong, but I'm positive this is correct, there's not one elected member or oncoming elected member in the upcoming term from this cohort that just won that lives in Old Town Alexandria. Everyone else either lives on the west end of the city or in other parts of the city, which really I think is indicative, I think, of perhaps a shift in the balance of power within the city.
Yeah. Well, I don't know the precinct counts or demographics, but it appears we have similar things in Fairfax in terms of like Herndon, in terms of there's a demographic that's underrepresented that's actually growing.
Right.
And it's growing because you can see it in the school systems, you can see it basically in the faces of the neighborhoods. And that's, I think, where this is going, right? I mean, there's this huge pool of people that are going to emerge in the political scene.
Right. The county's economic transformation from this bedroom community to its own economic entity. You've got Fortune 500 companies that are locating here now. We've got this massive transit expansion going on along the Silver Line that's going to run through Herndon and out to Dulles. You've got the Embark Richmond Highway initiative down Route 1. And then you've got pockets of folks all over the place. And you're absolutely right. You can just look into the school, the demographics of pick your school, really.
Yeah.
You know, and you can see this growth of non-native English speaking students, and you know, and it cuts many different ways.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you've got biotech parks in Chantilly, and you've got the Innova. The new Innova Personalized Health Accelerator that's being built out in Maryfield, where you're going to get this, you're going to attract talent from all over the world. But with all of this growth, you know, and we lose sight of this with this charged focus on a knowledge-based economy, that there's a very real wage bifurcation that's occurring in our society. And so for every one of these brand new, nice-looking apartment buildings, you know, you see a kava underneath of it, right?
Yeah.
Well, all the millennials like to go, well, who's working at that kava?
Right.
Where are they going to live?
Exactly.
Where are their children going to live? You know, can they
Preaching to the choir,
right,
man.
Can they commute from Stafford County out here?
No.
No, they can't. They have to live here. So we have to have, so transit and inclusionary zoning and all this stuff becomes part of the basket of items. And these people, this group, and also young professionals, this diverse, maybe the Obama-like coalition, if you will, is going to start, I think, exercising more and more political muscle over the coming election cycles. And that's sort of where I was looking at in the city of Alexandria.
Can I predict something here?
Yeah,
First
predict.
target, Board of Supervisors. I think they failed in the sense to look far enough ahead to see this problem emerging. You look at zoning, you look at planning, you look at approvals. There's not enough being done to actually accommodate all these changes that are going to be happening.
Right.
So if you think about everything that's being done, yeah, we get all these walkable, sort of nice density, mixed use areas, but to connect these things so they can be utilized by this crowd of people that are becoming, or these sort of non-English native speaking immigrant community.
Right.
Those folks have been completely left out of the planning process. And I'll just throw that out there as a potential.
Well, actually, you know, to your point, I would say that there is the interest that, you know, and I can only speak in broad terms as party chair because I keep everyone that talks to me confidential, you know. But the interest in running for Board of Supervisors, for potential open seats, for current occupied seats, the interest is the highest. It's the highest I've seen. I mean, you know, and these are people that have woken up to the fact that wait, actually, the supervisors are the most is where the influence is really exercised.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's really where the rubber meets the pavement. And
what's the primary process for a supervisor seat, by the way?
It's an open primary.
Yeah.
It's an open for that. So each,
Yeah.
so in case your viewers don't know,
Yeah.
there's 9 districts in Fairfax County, and there's each district has its boundaries, and there's an open there's a primary for that seat, and then there's the general election. You know, you have now a group of people that have emerged post 2016 and that are now making a life in Fairfax County, and they cut across really all income demographics and segments. I mean, but the one constant about them is how diverse the group is. Absolutely. And that's like the one thing I can probably reveal is like I've been blown away by how different every one of them is and their life and their stories. So,
well, I think I was doing a little research a couple of years ago, and at that time, there were over 120 languages spoken in the homes of Fairfax County public school residents.
right.
Over 120. This was a few years ago. I can only imagine it's higher than that. So that speaks to diversity that's out there that's emerging and growing. But also, how does that then translate or flex into the elected officials, right? Because eventually, you know, those people want power and they want influence. So I'm not surprised that you're starting to see a lot of that interest.
No, I mean, you know, how that translates is always is an interesting question because you really can't evaluate anything till after the fact. But what I've seen is if this sampling of candidates that I've spoken to is any indicator, then the interest among those constituencies is probably going to be palatable. You have a group of folks here in the county who are dealing with, this is a county that is becoming more dense. We're sort of replanning everything. We're repositioning ourselves because in order for a suburban jurisdiction to really be competitive in the 21st century, you have to become more transit oriented and you have to have more of these sort of urban mixed use type settings. But that transformation comes with on top of an area that already has very high property values, right? So our property values are extremely expensive. Then you're adding density, which drives up property values even further. Right. So if you're struggling to live here, you're sort of getting pushed to the margins, and then there's no thing else. The point at which Fairfax County started was already high, so it's going even higher. Sure. And where do those folks go? And I think that in the city of Alexandria, affordable housing was front and center. Yeah. And that came up all the time. And transit. Transit is one of the biggest, most substantial cost savings that a working family can have. Right. And effective transit will have a demonstrable impact on their bottom line. And so, I'm really keen on what 2019 looks like. It's something that I think is going to be a landmark year politically in the county.
So we talked about supervisors. What about some of the other House, Senate races? I mean, do you see a lot of interest?
Yeah, I definitely do. I think, so the most interesting race right now, and we'll see how it pans out, is the 40th House District. So, Tim Hugo did that little maneuver where he essentially took money out of the funding for the Northern Virginia Transportation Authority and moved it over to Metro as opposed to going along with the governor's proposal, the guarantor's tax.
Well, let's talk about that and some of the other races when we come back, because I do want to get into your perspective on sort of where the party is lining up in some of the areas that they're going to focus on. Folks, you're going to want to stick around for our next segment because Chairman Lagana and I are going to get into some more details for next year.
So, I just moved in with this family, and it's embarrassing. The little one, he likes to go outside and crawl around in the giant litter box. I don't know what he's doing. I mean, I was born and I knew how to use the litter box. Look at that. That's disgusting. Oh, poop already. You're making me nervous. Oh, okay, I can't look at this anymore. I really hope he grows out of this, for his sake.
So how was work?
It was 1,300 hours. My math class from 302 was in the trenches. Davy Roth had it the worst. Fractions were coming at him left and right. He just didn't get the damn things.
2 days ago, I tried to teach him what 1/4 of 1/2 was using different sizes of blocks.
Yesterday, I tried again by dividing up pizza. Both missions failed.
Oh, no.
But today, I was ready. I created a combat math game where the only way to beat the enemy is to out-fraction them. Davy conquered every last denominator. My game was so successful, the principal is deploying it to math squadrons all over the school.
Anywho, how was your day?
Oh, today my boss treated the office to salad wraps.
Salad wraps.
I know.
150 over 90.
180 over 111.
160 over 110. I had a stroke.
This is what high blood pressure looks like. You might not feel its symptoms, but the results from a stroke are far from invisible or silent. If you've come off your treatment plan, get back on it, or talk with your doctor to create an exercise, diet, and medication plan that works for you. Go to loweryourhbp.org.
If I would have followed a treatment plan, I would not be in this situation.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Cesar here. Thanks for coming back for our second segment. We're here with Chairman from the Fairfax County Democratic Committee, Dan Lagana. Let's get into it. We were talking a little bit about next year.
Right.
Fun stuff happening.
Yeah, I think, Tim Hugo is definitely the most vulnerable Republican out there. But he's still, and if you look at the performance of that district, Dante Tanner, his opponent in 2017, his vote share was really concentrated in a ton of small precincts. So the real key is reaching into those precincts and replicating some of that 2017 turnout, and also it's going to be doing a lot of the groundwork and talking to people that either didn't vote and that should have in some of the other precincts too.
Are the votes there? Because that, as I recall, that tends to skew to the right, in sheer population.
It does, and so yes, the votes are there. The votes, it's definitely a very winnable seat. It's a hard seat to win, and it requires a lot of groundwork. We've been out knocking doors in that district, actually, and Dante has since February of this year.
Really?
So, and he's still a year and a half out from Election Day. That's pretty freaking impressive. Yeah. And so that's the kind of work that's going to take, though.
Wow, that's a lot of preparation time.
It is.
So good. What are some other concerns you got? I mean, the House is up for grabs, clearly.
It is.
So
I think the Democrats have a good chance of reclaiming the House next year.
That would be huge.
It would be.
That would be huge.
It's not going to happen. It's going to happen in part in the southeastern part of the state, I think. And we'll see how that shakes out, how the court ruling affects 2019 if it can.
For the folks that aren't familiar, we had a whole challenge to the districting pieces, right?
Yes, and that the boundaries of these were determined to be unconstitutional, and that they have to. There's going to be a realignment. How and when that plays out, there's a lot of discussion around, but that is clear that readjusting the boundaries of some of these districts is the most, I think, clear path to victory for some of them. Now, we certainly have a handful of seats that, less than 200 votes determine control of the entire House of Delegates in 2017. So if you...
That's insane.
It's insane, right?
That's insane.
So if you have, if you're able to retake, you can still play hard in those seats, but you obviously, you want to have more of a playing field, and if you can readjust boundaries, then that's better.
See, we've done show after show on this whole gerrymandering of districts, and just how so crazy. And by the way, both sides are guilty of this.
Yeah, they are.
It's more prevalent in a state like Virginia, where it truly is a purple state, yet the representation does not reflect that. And I think for everyone's sake, you've really got to get a nonpartisan effort to draw the districts according to voters, not voting patterns, which is just, there's no way to run a democracy.
No, you have, it's always about incentives, right? Parties and legislators are not the people to have run redistricting, because the incentive, speaking bluntly, the incentive of the Fairfax County Democratic Committee chairs to maximize power for Democrats in Fairfax County. The same is true for the Republican. And you need to have a nonpartisan, some kind of nonpartisan institution that's responsible for this. And I think that, and I was really disappointed with the Gill versus Whitford decision, because the underlying incentives for redistricting need to change. And that would have been done in the decision. The Pennsylvania map, though, that was just redrawn is the best example.
Yeah. Just quickly, again, for the folks that don't know, it was pretty insane.
It was goofy.
Yeah, the way they
now
grouped.
It looks like squares, like how it should look.
Yeah. And that's, look, I've done show after show on this. I just think it is a threat to democracy. We, the people, in order to form a more perfect union, should decide the elections and the elected officials, not the elected officials that are in power already.
Right.
So.
So there's a lot of open-ended stuff with regard to gerrymandering, and they specifically left it open. The court still did not want to reach a decision on it. So there's light at the end of the tunnel.
So tell us more about kind of your either concerns or targets for next year as far as the outcome. What's that whole map going to look like? Let's say the Dems do take control of the House. I mean, what are they going to do?
Are you talking about the U.S. House, or are you talking about Virginia?
So let's talk about this year for the U.S. Congress.
Okay.
And then next year we can talk about the Commonwealth.
Okay.
So in Fairfax, we're influencing the 10th. I think the 11th is certainly safe. The 8th is certainly safe. So the 10th is like the big national spotlight.
Right.
We have State Senator Jennifer Wexton going up against Congresswoman Barbara Comstock in the 10th. How are you feeling about that? How's that looking for folks?
As far as a race is concerned, where you would want to be at this point in the race, we're there, you know. But I don't want to underestimate too. You know, Barbara Comstock.
She's an awesome campaigner.
You cannot underestimate her ability to campaign. She won on Election Day, Fairfax County. Her portion of the Fairfax County, the 49 precincts of the 10th Fairfax County, she actually won them. And then Luann Bennett in 2016 won Loudoun County, but just barely. Luann was a Democratic opponent. I'm sorry. But this year the environment, I think, in the you've got a candidate with countywide appeal in Loudoun, especially, and you must win Loudoun if you're a Democrat.
And Loudoun's demographics have shifted too. In the
Back
last
to our
years.
actually, this
That's
is
right.
funny. Back to our initial conversation. That's absolutely correct. And that entire eastern belt of Loudoun has changed. And the election of Quran Saints.
As you go west, it stayed the same.
Right. You know, and speaking about inclusionary zoning, there's this sort of line in Loudoun County that goes down Leesburg, and it's it's easier to build and develop on one side, and it's very hard on the other side.
That's right.
You know,
not in my backyard.
Right. So
keep those people over there.
Right, and that's the interesting part about it. You really see the effects of economic change on politics, and Loudoun County
Great
shows
point.
it. Right.
Great segue. Absolutely. No, and I say that in jest, but the reality is that represents, quite frankly, the microcosm that is prevalent in the entire country. You've got the two sort of competing where it's balanced. For the most part, it's a balance. Well, it tips right historically. But there's enough groundswell of new voters, development, growth, and just change in general, that's a toss-up seat. And I think that is kind of where I think the action and excitement is for this year.
Yeah, the suburban, you look at a lot of the competitive districts that Hillary won, that we're going after, but even some that we didn't think were targetable, but now we're running, we're at least starting out with 100 seats that are fully contested on the Democratic side. A lot of them are in suburbs.
Yep.
You know, Little Rock, Arkansas, right? Same thing. AR2, I believe. Orange County, California. These are suburban seats. Now, Democrats have always been licking their chops at Orange County. I've never, but this year in particular, there seems to be real interest in a real opportunity, in Orange County. But you know, it's funny. It's the suburbs and it's cities, and it's the growth of cities, and how it's great that we can appeal to suburban voters in this sense. But your point about the growing diversity of these cities and what that means for the future once Democrats are in power is one of these central questions. This is a question that we're going to answer in Fairfax County over the coming decade. And but it's really how that affects local policy too, because this Obama coalition 2.0, if you will, is the future of the United States.
No, absolutely, and I think there's some good and there's some fear with that.
Right.
There are people that, and we all love them, they're our family, that feel a sense of entitlement to have things stay a certain way. And for a lot of people, transformation is pretty scary. And rather than embrace it, they resist it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that has to do with how Trump rose, by the way. This is just my view on where this stuff came from. But it's a good thing. I mean, we were supposed to be the melting pot. We were supposed to be this sort of welcoming immigrant, culture. We're not there just yet. I think we're certainly getting to that. But either way, I think it'll be forced upon us to deal with in terms of just sheer numbers.
Yeah, we're always striving to form a more perfect union.
And that's a never-ending.
It's a never-ending.
It's a process.
It's a
that
process.
keeps happening. Absolutely.
And you've got to you got to embrace the process. And the thing with politics and with sports and with in the business world, these sort of events that occur, these black swan events, if you want to use a cliche term for it, people are always shocked by it. And then in hindsight, you look and then you're like, well, actually, it wasn't so shocking. But it always surprises me, And I think that, you see if you just, change will come. It'll come at the snap of a finger sometimes. The young, and I don't even want to say that, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's victory in NY 14.
Socialist Democrat.
Yeah. Look, we could dissect that a million ways. Yeah. New York's a close primary state. She was more representative of her district, which includes the Bronx and Astoria, so heavy millennial and Hispanic population, Latino and millennial. But this is a district that also went overwhelmingly for Hillary. I mean, she ran a hard-nosed, authentic, and that is such a key word right there. Yeah. Sure, and not to say that her opponent was not, by the way, but that when voters saw her, they trusted her, right?
Well, he wasn't around. First of all, let's put that on.
Yeah, I mean, he was aspiring for leadership, and but authenticity is really such a powerful, motivating force right now among Democratic voters in particular, but I think that goes across the board. And authenticity, and you see, back to our midterms that we were just talking about, you see some of these candidates that are running out in Texas. I mean, it's just incredible. They are communicating exactly who they are,
Yeah. So. Well, I think that's you said it. It's what people want to hear. They're tired of the politician. Don't tell me what I want to hear. Tell me who you are. Right. Tell me who I'm voting for. Dan, sir, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Folks, I could do another couple segments with Dan, but we'll have him back on another show. Stay with us for our next segment.
Okay, so we drowned the fire, stirred it, drowned it again, and now just feel if it's cold.
Yeah.
Cool.
Smokey just gave me a bear hug.
I know. I already posted it.
I got a crick in my neck, limp in my step, cramping in my muscles every time I try to flex. But if you throw me love, I'll throw you some more.
It's a big responsibility.
Oh, it's huge. I know, it's huge.
And the salary.
Oh my god, yes.
Right?
I mean, like, I was about to move in with my parents, and right before, so this saved me.
I really believe in you,
Thank you. It's nice to hear that from someone.
These are cool. Did you, what did you...
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar here. Welcome back. This next segment is certainly near and dear to my heart. My next guest is Jerry Poje. He is a member of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Jerry, thank you so much for coming.
Yeah,
Full disclosure, my family came from a region, a division of affordable housing.
Oh.
If not for that, I'd probably be robbing banks right now. It was a great investment.
No, I'm glad that you had the opportunity.
This is near and dear to me.
Yeah.
I mean, so enlighten us just in general what the committee does and.
So the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee, as its very name would say, we provide advice to the Department of Housing and Community Development about a range of issues, but most particularly an issue that's becoming more and more of a crisis issue for Fairfax County.
Okay.
The crisis in affordability and accessibility of housing. Every child growing up deserves to grow up in a home that they feel secure in.
Sure.
And we now have failed to develop sufficient housing stock that people are in dire situations. The Department of Housing and Urban Development would say that to be safely housed, you shouldn't be spending more than 30% of your salary on your housing.
So let me make sure I understand this. So the recommendation is that you've got $100 coming in the door. You're not supposed to spend more than 30 of that in any type of living, housing, either mortgage or rental situation.
Right.
That's not where most people are, by the way.
It's not where most people are, but the reason for that is because there are so many other essentials aspects of life that a family needs to spend money on.
Sure.
Education for their children, health care for themselves, food, all the other expenses of living in a house, telephones, electricity, water, everything that you could imagine. That's where the rest of your salary goes to. And if you start spending over that, you're called housing burdened.
Okay.
Which means you're robbing from Peter to pay the Paul of housing.
So is that before they're saving for retirement, IRAs, 401ks?
This is before everything.
Wow. Okay.
Because you can't build a nest egg for your retirement.
Correct.
If you're spending the money on rents.
Yeah.
Now, the average rent in Fairfax County,
oh gosh,
almost $1,800. You know what kind of a salary you need to have as a family in order to safely be housed at that rental rate?
Yeah.
Almost $70,000 per year.
Yeah. And what's the average household income in Fairfax County?
Below 50.
Yeah.
So we're in this crisis. The
Sure.
gap between where people's salary are and where their housing needs are is out of control. And if we don't take public policy measures to change that around, we're going to be in a very uneconomical area of the country.
So who's your target for that? Is it the Board of Supervisors?
Boards of Supervisors play a major role. The Redevelopment Housing Authority.
I'm not picking on them tonight. I just
no, it's actually this is where we elect leaders. We need leaders who are going to understand what are the structural challenges in our community at the moment, and how do we steer the ship so that we're going to be able to have an existing economy that grows and thrives.
Yeah.
And
now, Reston, if we can talk about that, because I have property there. I live in Herndon. So Robert Simon had a vision. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
I'm familiar with it. Terrific vision.
That never really panned out, as I understand it.
So it did pan out in Reston, right? Reston became one of the first model communities.
But spreading from there.
For some reason, we didn't have clones of Bob Simon penetrating into the private development community saying, here's a good vision, buy into it. And the county, while it loved the vision from Reston, never thought that it itself should be setting up policy circumstances to nurture more of that throughout the county.
Well,
the time is now. You can look in the past and say, well, we didn't do it. The time is now for people to invent a better shared vision of what could and should be done.
So do you talk to or meet with the Board of Supervisor or Chairman Bolova?
We do.
What's the response back? What's the feedback?
So the boards of supervisors, we serve, having been nominated and acted upon to join the Affordable Housing Committee by the elected leadership of the county. In doing that, we are perhaps their pocket experts, if you will, on this particular issue, and we seek to give to them analysis on what needs to be done. For the last 2 years, we've been working on a new strategic plan for affordable housing, and we've been successful to the extent that the plan, as we've put forward, has had 2 phases. The first phase has been approved by the boards of supervisors, so we're now rapidly working on implementing that through the staff of the Department of Housing and Community Development. Phase 2, which is the phase where we're going to have to put money where our mouths are, is the one that's in formation. And this current board and the one that gets elected in 2019 is going to play the pivotal role. Anybody wishing to become a new board member better bone up on this issue. It's central to the future of the county for us to solve the affordable housing crisis.
So tell us a little bit of what's entailed in this proposal or this.
So what's entailed in it is our understanding that every aspect of housing and every economy in the county, from high-end to crisis poverty, is embedded in this new strategic vision for the county. We have places in our county that have been populated with McMansions. Take McLean. Very high-end community.
Well, the zoning won't allow anything but that, let's be honest. Right?
So living in a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom house may have been ideal when you were in a young family stage of life, and you may have had enough children to put into all of those bedrooms and bathrooms. But now that your family has matured, they've gone off into other geographies, you may have a widow living in a 5-bedroom, 4-bathroom house, wishing she could stay in her beloved community of McLean. There's no place for her to move into in the community where her doctor, her dentist, her hairdresser, her bridge club, her library, everything that she has been familiar with is not, it's not available for her. We haven't built that kind of housing stock, and it's going to take a private-public venture to make sure we start to change the trajectory of types of housing that we need for everybody in the county.
Now, is the current board on board with this?
Mostly so. They are on board. You know, I'm wearing a button today that says One Fairfax. This is the board's approval. Both the school board and the boards of supervisors have approved a policy that says, as we go forward, let's make sure we're making judgments about policy advancement seen through the eyes of a racial and social equity lens.
It's interesting you put those two together, because I've always felt that some people stayed away from the school, the housing, the economic. I mean, all those, like a tapestry, are woven together.
It's so important, Cesar, that we begin to break out of these silos and see how interrelated everything is. An average school teacher, new school teacher coming into the school system is making less than $50,000 a year. If he or she is lucky, they'll find something in the surrounding geography. It may not even be in Fairfax.
That's a crime.
for which they now need to commute into Fairfax to do that
It's
work.
that way with first responders. I mean, you can go down the list.
And we can only easily understand that a school teacher teaching in the community where he and she are raising their own family is showing due diligence in the education of those children. And they have time because they live in the community to take care of their own children in the way we would hope every parent would be able to invest in nurturing
This
a child.
is really a radical, a fundamental shift by the way we've traditionally done managed zoning development, et cetera.
Well,
allocation.
Everybody will tell you when you're dealing with housing, the critical issue is the cost of the land. So how much land is owned by the county that could become the starting point for public-private partnership that would change the shape of the way we build communities?
So let me challenge you on that, because I've had this, and please enlighten me if I'm wrong on this. When you have that, there's one goal for the private sector. That is profit.
Right.
The public interest has nothing to do with profit.
Right.
In fact, you cannot quantify in out years what the return is.
Right.
But that's not what the private systems want. They want a return on this dollar, this quarter, this year.
And I think you're right. There are challenges on how do you optimize for different players in the arena of building housing. I think there's many communities that have figured out. You don't build a public housing standalone structure.
God bless you.
This is not what's needed.
Right.
I mean, we have parts of our county where if we're going to rescue children who are living in a impoverished portion of the community, they need to be going to school with children who have different economies, so they're all capturing the wave of a vision about their own future growth and development, and we can do that. It means that you have to be thinking more complexly about a project. And we've built one in Fairfax County, workforce housing, right near the government center. The government center, a huge plot of land, worked with a private developer, leveraged the available state and federal housing dollars to build something that is a complex living space, very beautifully designed, where you're having people paying market rate, living together with people who are getting a subsidy rate for their housing. They're all workforce people. The ones that we need to have in Fairfax County government are living in these communities.
And that's set for a duration of time, or is that a permanent?
That'll be a permanent operation, which is what we have to have.
We're going to be back. I love this topic, folks. Please come back and join us for our last segment.
We are neighbors and best friends.
I love my sister.
My heart doesn't see race. Love is love.
Our family is no less than any other family.
Open road, here comes the Heffley family.
Whether it's a short trip or a long haul.
Estimated time, 47 hours.
They will beg.
You're hungry? I'm happy to provide.
They will plead.
Deep fried butter on a stick.
But whatever you do, don't wimp out.
Now you're talking.
Make them buckle up.
He can't hurt.
Remember, safety first. Cheese curls second.
Are you orange?
Eva Marie smoked 12,000 packs of cigarettes over 15 years. She quit
And now there's a new lung cancer screening that could save her life. You stopped smoking. Now start screening. No matter how much you smoked, early detection could save you. Talk to your doctor or learn more at savedbythescan.org.
We're back to the Inside Scoop. Here again, your host.
Hi folks, Cesar back here with you for our final segment. With me is my guest, Jerry Poje. He is a member of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee. Love this topic. Let's continue it because let me just use Herndon, my hometown, as an example. Elementary school there is about 70% free, reduced lunches, meals, and programs. Right. That stems out to the surrounding area, obviously the housing. I mean, this thing permeates everything. So development, investment. How does something like that? How do we sort of plan for that in the future?
So Cesar, that's a terrific example. You know, for years, Fairfax County has passed separate bond issues for capital improvement of schools, of the government. Yeah. Now we're starting to understand that single-purpose capital improvement is a death trap. It's taking us down blind alleys. A community in which the kids currently are at 70% free and reduced lunch tells you so much, not just about the children, but the families that they come from. So the families that are delivering those children now as fresh, young, bright bodies to the schooling process, they're people who are struggling mightily with their own economies, and yet they're probably doing terrific services to everybody in that surrounding area. They may be in retail. Average retail worker in Fairfax County, $29,000 per year. If two retail workers are married to each other, they still haven't reached that pinnacle of the average rent for the county. We need to begin to think, let's say a capital improvement is being proposed for that very school in Herndon. You don't want to just renovate the classrooms and take the trailer population and put them in the building. That's necessary, but it's not sufficient. That school needs to become a much more important and more complex community resource. There should be social service agencies, public and private, providing the kind of one-stop shopping that the community is going to need. And guess what you could build on top of that school? You could build affordable housing that would allow, perhaps for a 2 to 3 year period, a reduced rate for the new school teacher, or for the bus driver, or for the maintenance crew that provide all the essential services, keeping that building going. They would live on site in the very places where the children
And the county could control that, correct?
The county would have a great opportunity for doing that. It requires vision on the part of the boards of supervisors.
Leadership and commitment.
And on the part of the county executive and his deputies that really are charged now with shaping the future of Fairfax County. I'm optimistic, but I'm only going to be more optimistic if more people step into this space and say, we need to do it. We got to build the new Reston type communities in every part of Fairfax County. We can't wait for somebody to come from the outside with a vision and do it. We know this vision could work here.
And it's truly an integrated solution, right? Because you're addressing all the separate components, right? You're developing and building these things that influence and affect each other and impact each other, correct?
And we need to be assured that other communities around the country are recognizing the housing crisis in their area. They know the threats to its own economic development. I mean, Fairfax County has an economic development agency seeking to woo businesses into our community. But there's no business that's coming to Fairfax only with the president and vice presidents and chief financial officers making $6K salaries. They're also bringing people who are going to make $60,000, $40,000, $30,000, and they're going to contract with essential services like building maintenance for people who are going to work at the very low levels. All those people are necessary for that business development. If we can't provide the infrastructure to house those folks, those businesses are going to relocate maybe to Massachusetts. Massachusetts this year passed a $1.8 billion state bond for supporting the affordability of housing, preserving existing housing, and setting in motion the creation of new housing. Boston's going to be out competing Fairfax if we don't see the challenge of fixing our housing problem. That's a great vision to put before the people. And we're going to need candidates for office.
Jerry, I don't think anyone's aware of that, quite frankly.
It will work, and we need to get on with it. We have the opportunity in 19 to elect a state senate, a state legislature, and county officials who should all be on board with the need for the reinvigoration of Fairfax County to be livable for all.
But when you cut it down, when you slice it, it's really the county board of supervisors, the chairman, that really control this, right? I mean, so we can get some, incentives from Richmond, but ultimately it lies with the board of supervisors.
Every county should be part of this larger challenge. So, for example, if the state of Massachusetts is passing a statewide bond,
gotcha.
The flow of the money from that statewide bond should go to the communities that are figuring out that they should also be leveraging their resources to do local bonds. And these bonds that we would be talking about would create revolving funds. In other words,
at the state level.
Loaning the money out, getting the housing built, and then reclaiming the same money for you to do more of this.
And it's just a little promo for, this is why you need a change in Richmond, because the current legislative body would never, in my humble opinion, approve anything so generous, because you're basically helping develop these communities.
Cesar, let's think. The state of Virginia ranks 12th among all the states in the rates of evictions. In Virginia, we are throwing out onto the street over 140 people every day. Every day. And the reason we're doing that is in part because we haven't created the affordability of housing stock to safely house everybody. And it's a dog-eat-dog world. People have an economic travail, an injury, a medical sickness, somebody dies in the family, and somebody is very ill. We shouldn't be throwing people out onto the street because they couldn't make the affordable rent for that month. We should have a safety net created in order to ensure that we're thriving and we're going to have the housing stock necessary for the next generation to safely build their own communities as strong, vibrant places.
And you're talking more just the opportunity. Right. You're creating the opportunity where people can rent or can buy, not necessarily subsidizing these
no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about making sure the physical infrastructure in every community is adapted to all the ranges of economies necessary to have that community thrive. Each one of us is wearing a jacket. At some point in time, we're going to have to take it to a cleaner's. We want to go to a cleaner's in our own community. How much of a salary base should that small business have for its owner and for its workforce? We want that service. We want to go to a drugstore when we're sick and be able to get those prescriptions filled. We want to have those people live in our community. We want to have a community that's vibrant enough that it has a home for everybody.
Some people will say there's enough affordable housing out there now.
They're not looking at the data. I mean, you can say, You can make whatever statement you want. Our Affordable Housing Advisory Committee has shown that we are missing 31,000 affordable rental units in Fairfax County. And if you look towards our future, the need, in addition to that 31, is going to be 62,000 additional affordable units
by when?
In 15 years. So we're in a race. And I think we can win this race, but it's going to be won by people with bright minds and open hearts and a commitment that says we can grow a vision to really get ourselves straight in this county. This is a big challenge, but I think we're up for it.
I think it's a great message. How can people get involved? I mean, I'm sure there's public hearings.
So there'll be public hearings. Every year we suggest a budget through the county executive, and then we ratify it. If we don't hear from people that answer the question, do we need more affordable housing in our area, then we won't get people feeling pressure to say, yes, we better do this. There are other ways. Our committee went out to the highways and byways of Fairfax County, sat down with folks, called them into public hearings to say, what's your challenges? We went to a hearing at the Annandale Government Center in which an entire table full of people who were doing 2 jobs for each of the adults in this rental housing came to participate. They described the challenges. They're doing 2 families living in one house, right, 1 apartment, and they are doing 4 jobs to serve their community, and they are packed densely, and they had the landlord come to them and say, we're going to raise the rent 20%. Now, because we don't have available housing stock, we're giving almost no hope to those hardworking people that this is a place where we want them to. This is the type of person
there's a disparity.
These people were my grandparents who were immigrants who came to this country. And I'm here today doing quite well, but it's only because there was an opportunity for people way back when to work hard and begin to have a future for themselves.
And that's why I want to get involved, and I'm encouraging everyone else to get involved. I think this is important, not just for our region, but quite frankly, for our country. So, Jerry, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have you back because I can talk about this more. Folks, appreciate you joining us this evening. I hope this was of value. Please come back and see us again.